So, listen to this. You probably think that Juninho is the best free kick taker of all time. The same way you probably think Messi holds the record for the most assists in a calendar year, but you're wrong. In reality, both records belong to the same man, Marcelinho Carioca. Look, I'll give it to you, it isn't even fair to compare Marcelinho to regular humans. This guy was a genetic anomaly. Known as Angel Feet in Brazil, he wore a size 36 shoe. His feet were so small that when he got new boots, instead of getting the under-18s to wear them in like all the other players did, he had to give his to the women's team. But those tiny feet were a cheat code. Every time it was like he hit the ball with a baseball bat. People say Juninho hit free kicks like they were penalties. Sure, but with Marcelinho, if free kicks were like penalties, then corners were like free kicks. He scored direct corner kicks so often, I once saw him score one with the outside of his foot against Rogério Ceni. Come on, imagine lining up from a 0-degree angle against the greatest keeper in the league's history and thinking, yeah, a Trivela should do it. The guy was an absolute magician who'd literally kneel down and talk to the ball before every free kick. But really, let me be honest, it wasn't just about the tiny feet. This guy had the greatest mentors imaginable. Because at 16 years old, while he was still spending his free time selling ice cream in Copacabana to make a buck, he was also training with Flamengo's first team on an amateur contract, sharing the pitch with Zico, who was not only considered the greatest free kick taker of all time, but would stay behind practicing them every training session. So one day, in Marcelinho's own words, I got another of the younger guys to come up there with me and asked him, "Mr. Zico, is it okay if we watch?" He told us, "If you're going to stay, you might as well practice too." The other guy got so nervous, he barely moved, but when I picked up the ball, I remember the free kick Zico himself had taken against São Paulo, so I lined up as if I was about to hit the far post and smacked it into the other, leaving the keeper planted into the ground. After I saw the ball go in, I got so emotional, I yelled, "That's your goal," and hugged him. Everyone got a bit embarrassed and told me to get off him, but from there on out, Zico called me to practice with him every day. And so, that same year, Marcelinho was subbed in for Zico on his debut right in the middle of the flu-flat derby, and 2 years later, as Zico left for Japan and Vanderlei Luxemburgo, the future national team coach and Real Madrid manager, took over the team, despite having Junior, a free kick specialist with 74 caps for Brazil on the pitch, Vanderlei followed Zico's wish and let the kid take every single one of the team set pieces no matter what. As he confessed himself, it was almost awkward every time I'd pick up the ball. But if he was the chosen one, how come you have never heard of him? Well, because Vanderlei, the same guy who helped him build his career at first, would also be the one who sabotaged him, blocking him from ever playing for the national team, all because of a girl. Though, in all fairness to him, he wasn't the only one trying to ruin Marcelinho's career. Even with both Zico and now Vanderlei gone, Marcelinho was so obsessed with Flamengo ever since he was a kid that when his first ever manager, the legendary Tele Santana, tried to recruit him for his São Paulo team that had just won the Brazilian championship, he said no. That was a bad decision. Over the following year, at Flamengo, Marcelinho would fall in and out of the team as he got into a huge bust-up with his new manager Carlinhos Violino, all while São Paulo, who he had just rejected, not only took a second league title in a row, but won the Libertadores, stepping out to the Intercontinental Cup and defeating Cruyff's dream team to become world champions. And that was still not even half of it, because the year after that, not only would Marcelinho watch Flamengo go through 4 different managers, while São Paulo won a second Libertadores back-to-back. But when, at the very end of the season, he somehow got Flamengo to the final of the Supercopa Libertadores against São Paulo, despite him setting up 3 goals himself, Flamengo could not avoid a penalty shootout where, of course, after he missed the decider, they went and pinned the loss on him. So, a month later, as he watched São Paulo put the cherry on the cake, defeating the mighty AC Milan of the 1990s to be named made world champions for the second year in a row and established themselves as the greatest Brazilian football dynasty since Pelé's Santos. Well, in what can only be described as one of the worst transfer market decisions of all time, in order to pay Renato Gaúcho's wages, hoping he wouldn't leave, Flamengo's president called their three major academy graduates of that time up to his office, Marcelinho Carioca, Júnior Baiano and Jalminha, and informed them they had all been sold. When Marcelinho tried to tell him he wouldn't go, he just replied, "You're already gone." So Marcelinho made them a promise. "There will be a day when you'll ask me to come back and I'm the one who's gonna say no." And I'll tell you something, Renato Gaúcho left no matter what, but Marcelinho, he made sure they'd miss him way more than they ever missed Renato. 2 years after rejecting the world champions because he didn't want to leave Rio de Janeiro, Marcelinho was arriving in their hometown in order to sign for their rivals, who had not even won their own state championship in the past 6 years. Corinthians was in such an awful state at the time that even as Marcelinho channeled all of his anger into his performances, finishing that debut season with 33 goals and 41 assists, 74 goal contributions in 70 games, setting the all-time assist record for a calendar year and even getting his national team debut, they'd still choke both the state and national championships to Palmeiras, despite him getting an assist in each of the finals. In Marcelinho's own words, "I'd go to the cinema, the cafe, and everywhere the fans would tell me, 'What's the point if you don't score against them?'" So, the first time he faced off against Palmeiras the following season, with his team already trailing a goal behind and the opposition's keeper refusing to place a wall as Marcelinho was handed a 40-yard free kick, he blasted it into the top corner, then came back, scored the winner, and 3 months later, in the final as they faced off again, already with 27 goal contributions to his name, he scored the opener in the first leg, watched him go behind again, and scored the equalizer from a free kick with no run-up to make Corinthians state champions once again. Doing all of that, while simultaneously putting down 12 goal contributions in 8 matches in the Brazilian Cup, with 2 goals and an assist to beat South American champions Grêmio in the final, bringing Corinthians their first ever trophy of that kind, while being top assist provider and player of the tournament for both of those competitions. It was now 128 goal contributions in 2 years, and yet, despite national team manager Zagallo calling up a sort of B team for that year's Copa America, including 4 different midfielders who were outplaying the Japanese league, Marcelinho's name was still not on the list. As he'd say years later, personal interests always speak louder. If agents rule football now, it was no different back then. Marcelinho, however, was notorious for refusing to sign with any agent. Yeah, they did not like that. Next year, even if the trophies would slow down, the free kicks would keep coming, hitting a career-high 13 goals from free kicks in a single season. For comparisons, Messi's best tally ever was 8. Yet, somehow, his best goal of the year did not come from a free kick. It came against Santos, with Pelé in the stands and his own son Edinho between the posts. A goal so beautiful, Pelé watched Marcelinho score against his own son, decided to have a celebratory plaque made in its honor, and then personally delivered it to him. In fact, Marcelinho really was that good that year Valencia signed him to play alongside Romário, but even then, with another Copa America to be played, they called up seemingly every emerging talent except him, and the corruption was only about to become more scandalous. At Valencia, it quickly became clear Marcelinho had been a board-mandated signing, only brought in an attempt to appease Romário, who had not stopped causing mayhem ever since he had arrived at the club. Though, instead, in the blink of an eye, Valdano got sacked and replaced with Ranieri, who would get into a huge bust-up with Romário, catching Marcelinho in the crossfire, benching him for 2 months straight, after only 5 matches for the club. Traumatizing him so much, he'd go back to Brazil asking for virtually any club to take him back in, even if he'd still come true to his word and reject Flamengo once they did finally come back for him, instead ending up in what has got to be the weirdest transfer scheme in football history. Listen, before any club got to him, the president of the São Paulo State Football Federation had the brilliant idea of buying him back and setting up what he called Disque Marcelinho, a cell phone hotline any fan in the state could call for the price of R$3 in order to vote for which of the state's 4 main clubs should get Marcelinho. I can't believe I have to explain this, but obviously, Corinthians won with 62% of all calls being in their favor. I mean, it's their club legend. The guy literally insisted on wearing their club badge over his heart in every promotional event. All the other fans knew they had no real shot at swaying the polls in their favor, meaning that basically no one else voted, and the whole thing ended up being a financial disaster for the federation, making back just 1.7 million of the 7 they had paid for him, forcing them to beg Corinthians for 4 million to soften the blow at the end of it all. Though, it must be said, it was more than worth it. It was the start of the greatest golden era in the club's history. 26 years old, about to enter his prime, reunited with Vanderlei Luxemburgo, and determined to prove to everyone in Brazil that whatever happened in Europe had nothing to do with how good he was on the pitch, Marcelinho bulldozed everyone who came in his way. Right from the first match day of the Brazilian Championship, with Juninho on the wall, he opened his tally with a knuckleball so furious that it almost decapitated the kid before he could even aspire to match his record. And 2 months later, as he pretty much scored the same free kick again and then rolled the ball into the net straight from a penalty to get his second of the night, he was already up to 11 goals and 7 assists in 12 matches, being directly responsible for 72% of his team's goals. So much so that once Vanderlei was made national team manager as well, he wasted no time, immediately giving him his second and third ever call-ups and watching as he blasted in yet another free kick against Yugoslavia and scored a great volley against Ecuador. Though, behind the scenes, their relationship was already doomed. Once back from the international break, Corinthians collapsed. With only 1 win in 7 games, Marcelinho's 6 goal contributions were basically the only thing keeping them together, which was why it was so inexplicable when Vanderlei dropped him from the team, making him train separately from the rest for the next 19 days, and blacklisting him from Brazil's next friendly in the meantime, before suddenly bringing him back just as the knockout stages of the Brazilian Championship started, clearly showing that he knew he could not finish the job without him, and then watching Marcelinho prove it, putting in the corner for the winner in the quarterfinals, scoring and assisting 2 in the semis, and then popping out for the first leg of the final, watching them go behind 2-0 and creating their first goal before scoring the equalizer, opening the score in the second leg, only for them to concede another, sending the final into a tiebreaker third leg, where it finally killed the game with yet another goal, making Corinthians Brazilian champions. However, do not for a second think this evened out things between him and Vanderlei, as Marcelinho would claim years later, those 19 days in solitary were the worst days of my life. Did Vanderlei sabotage me? Well, he made me miss 5 games right as I was about to win the Golden Boot. 2 more goals would have been enough. In those 5 games, they had 3 penalties. You do the math. And if there was any doubt that was done on purpose, then, even if no one really knew what had happened yet, once Vanderlei left Corinthians for good, he just refused to call Marcelinho back up to the national team no matter how absurd his performances got. Having been named as the best midfielder in all of South America that year, the following one, determined to prove he was the one who had carried Vanderlei to success, he stayed out of trouble all year, opening things up by winning the state championship with a goal and assist in the semis and 2 goals in the final, carrying all of that momentum straight into the Brazilian Championship, opening up with 13 goals and 14 assists in 19 matches, just absolutely ridiculous numbers, at one point getting 2 assists, scoring a trademark free kick, and then an absolute screamer all in a single game against Botafogo. By the final stage, teams already knew what they had coming. A goal and an assist were enough to close out the quarters, and then, in the semis, despite missing the second leg, he still secured the winner in the first, meaning that even if for once he didn't get on the score sheet in the final, he was handed the golden ball as the best player in the country, while Corinthians, who had only won 1 league title in their history before his arrival, now took 2 in a row, making it all that much more absurd a month later by showing up to the first ever Club World Cup and making it past the likes of Real Madrid on their way to the final against Romário's Vasco da Gama, winning it all on penalties, making Corinthians world champions. And still, not a single call-up from Vanderlei. It wasn't even given a chance in a friendly. Yet, their feud wasn't over. The following year, after scoring and assisting to give Corinthians a 2-goal advantage over rivals Palmeiras in a Libertadores semi-final, Marcelinho watched his teammates concede twice to send the game into penalties. And there, ironically, the man who scored free kicks as if they were penalties failed to convert the biggest penalty of his career. And no matter how much he tried to justify himself, claiming the keeper was way off his line, it didn't matter. It was already clear the fans wouldn't forget it that easily. And then, with Corinthians dropping an embarrassing Brazilian championship performance following the departures of Dida, Edilson and Silvinho, as they looked for someone to come in and get the house in order, the board went with Vanderlei Luxemburgo. And even if it did initially lead to a major surge in form from Marcelinho, with 12 goal contributions in 11 matches on his way to the knockout stages of the state championship, where he'd score once in the semis and twice in the final to secure the title, then it all blew up. With Marcelinho and Vanderlei actually getting into a fist fight, forcing the board to kick Marcelinho out of the club, becoming the biggest source of gossip in the entire country, as everyone tried to figure out exactly what had happened between those two in order for them to hate each other so much. With the newspapers eventually figuring out that the reason their relationship had broken down in 1998, leading Vanderlei to force Marcelinho to train by himself for those infamous 19 days, was that once the teammate just happened to stay at the same hotel as Tiazinha, a famous TV actress and major sex symbol at the time, and well, despite the fact Vanderlei kept hitting on her, she'd end up rejecting him, insinuating he was too old, and later going into a room with Marcelinho, who'd be caught by Vanderlei sneaking back into his own room at late hours of the night, causing him to throw a temper tantrum, insinuating Marcelinho had stolen his girl. Yeah. A situation as dumb as that dragged along for 4 years, tormenting Marcelinho all throughout the best years of his career and now leaving him without a club just as the Copa America was about to be played, which hurt even more now that Vanderlei was no longer in command and since Marcelinho had finally gotten another call-up in one of Brazil's final matches before the tournament. This whole thing made him so hopeless he actually left everything behind to go play in Japan himself, yet, in what may have been his final battle cry, he came back a year later, joined Vasco and demolished the Carioca State Championship, putting up 13 goal contributions in 13 games with a hat-trick in the semi-final and a direct corner in the final to be named the player of the tournament, Vasco's player of the year and the best midfielder in the country, before truly accepting the life of a journeyman, playing for 8 clubs in 5 years with multiple failed comebacks to Corinthians, even though he retired with 206 goals and 199 assists for the club, totaling 405 goal contributions in 433 appearances, making him their all-time top scorer in the Brazilian Championship, their all-time top assist provider in all competitions, in fact, the league's all-time top assist provider across all clubs, and above all, the player who won the most titles for Corinthians, in 2007, being voted by their fans as their best ever player ahead of Sócrates and Rivellino, yet only ever playing 4 matches for the Brazilian national team.